All right. So, welcome to the Charles Michel and Friends podcast. First episode sounds like we're car salesmen, but we're not.
Very on the nose, very little. We're going to get into a lot of different discussions throughout the podcast and however long this lasts. But it's exactly that. You and I have been friends since high school and always had the political bug. And we've always just talked as friends. Uh, and I think you and I have a particularly like a good take when it comes to political discussion. We're not just here for you know topic of the day or clickbait or anything like that, and we can just have our own perspective. And I think that's we have a voice that needs to be heard, and so I think we came together to make this happen.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
So, what's on your mind, Charles?
I've been thinking about obviously Biden and Trump and everything that's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm asking myself sort of two questions, and in particularly coming off of the heels of CPAC.
Right.
I'm asking myself, is Trump going to fade away over time?
Mm.
CPAC, I don't know. I didn't listen to his speech. I don't,
Were you
I just,
terrified?
well, it's not even that I'm terrified. I don't want to, I'm going to just be sad
Entertain. Right.
afterwards. You know what I mean? I don't want to
Mm-hmm.
give
Mm-hmm.
an hour and a half of my life to listen to another Trump speech and blah blah blah
Right.
and illegal voting and this and that. I'm not interested. And to be from what I heard, the analysis, it seemed to be that it was just sort of more of the same greatest hits
Yeah.
and whatnot. But
Right.
I'm wondering, like, if Trump's whole thing is like the more attention he gets, the more powerful he becomes, whether he's getting attention for something good or bad. I think like then the opposite must be true, that the less attention he gets, the less powerful he becomes. So
Right.
I'm wondering, and this sort of ties into how I feel about Biden too.
Right.
I'm wondering if we are looking at this from too small a perspective. So when
Mm.
you look at Trump, Trump's perspective, Trump's impact on the Republican Party, we're
Right.
only 6 weeks into the Biden presidency, and then conversely, when you look, we're only 6 weeks into the Biden presidency. So the talk about where's the stimulus check and where's the $15 an hour minimum wage, I'm wondering on both sides of the spectrum, are we judging or viewing things from too small a time?
I think anyone who thinks Trump is going to go away is doing so on their own peril. I
Okay.
think I think Trump is a showman. He's shown that he's an attention seeker. He likes attention. It's something he's
Right.
always wanted. And I watched a little bit of his speech at CPAC. Sort of watched some coverage over from just a few people who were kind of analyzing or talking about that speech itself. He was exactly what you thought he was going to be. There's really
Correct.
nothing new about him.
Yes.
But I think what his speech really crystallized was the fact that he's a man. He pretends that there is substance to him, but there
Yeah.
is really no substance, because if you actually try and follow logically like what he's talking about. For example, he was defining what Trumpism is, right? Like he was one
Okay.
part of the presentation, he was like, so many people. I do a terrible Trump, I know. So many people want to know what Trumpism is, and then he goes on to this like spiel about what Trumpism is, and he
Okay.
starts off by saying it's about like taxes, like lowering taxes, right? Like the
Right.
typical Republican. Like when you
The
think of
typical.
Republican orthodoxy, that's really what he's talking about. Except he
Okay.
just puts a lot more of like he pretends to be more of a populist, and it's very telling that the people that he's now endorsed pre his presidency speak to exactly that the contradiction in what he thinks he is. For
Mm-hmm.
example, he endorsed, I think this Tim Scott, I think.
Yes.
He's and he's a senator who like lambasted Trump on his like on his China policy
Right.
and the tariffs specifically. And
Yes.
yet Trump comes around and that's the first person he endorses.
Yeah. No. Trump doesn't even have an ideological base. It's
Mm.
funny. As you said, he's very much hot air, and so long as kiss the ring or whatever, you know what I mean. Like if he would endorse AOC if AOC kissed the ring. You know what I mean. Like he would endorse Bernie Sanders if Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
People can tell because the one sort of hallmark of his presidency is he didn't bomb any new countries. You know what I mean? He doesn't even
Mm.
care enough about Asia or care enough about that part of the world to even think about, like, he's not left wing, right wing. He's just Trump. He's just whoever is going to give me money, endorse me, sing my praises, etc. And he'll sort of do what he has to do. When you talk about him being a kingmaker, do you think he will, like, exactly that? Like, he'll have his mini White House in Florida, in Mar-a-Lago,
Mm-hmm.
and people will come there on weekends and ask for his blessing.
It's exactly what it's been like. I don't know if you've been noticing, but literally a lot of the Republican Party, even right before the CPAC event happened, all the big leaders of the Republican Party, like Kevin McCarthy, the minority leader, so he flew to Mar-a-Lago to actually go and
Mm-hmm.
talk to Trump. And if you've noticed, a lot of Republicans have been doing this. So this
Mm-hmm.
is even at CPAC, any of the speakers that went on and did touch on Trump were basically saying this is the party of Trump. So in the mini civil war that they had right after the elections, right after the January 6th sort of riot happened, there was this huge thing between Mitch McConnell and Donald Trump, and Mitch McConnell was trying to like condemn all the actions by Trump, saying that Trump is finished, he's going to go away after this. It just seems that at CPAC, especially, that Trump has won. However, it's very interesting, I think, and I think this is a good point to make, that they do a straw poll right after the CPAC events, and for the last few years, the people who have won those CPAC the straw poll, Rand Paul.
Yeah, Ron Paul. Yeah.
Rand Paul has won it. Of course, Mitt Romney as well.
Mm-hmm.
So Mitt Romney and Rand Paul have won it as like the most popular figures from CPAC, right? These were people who people thought, oh, these were going to be the leaders of the Republican parties, but it's turned out to not really be true. It's never come out that true as well, with the exception of Mitt Romney. All in all, to say that I think the CPAC crowd is really a very particular type of audience. And
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't say that they're really indicative of every Republicans per se, but I think it's
Right.
just like a little taste of what is that crowd, especially. I think that's just a very pro-Trump crowd that wants to hear what they want to hear, being told that Trump is king and he's the greatest thing that has ever walked on earth.
Mhm. Well, so then, okay, so then let's sort of pivot a bit and talk about Biden. Like,
Right.
do you 6 weeks in, is it too early to give him criticism or praise? Like, do we have, because it's the presidency and there's so many crises, do we have to look at it in 6 month intervals? Like, I was watching the news today and they were saying earliest that the relief bill would be on Joe Biden's desk is March 14th. So assuming within a week of that, the checks are going to be out.
Mm.
So do we say, hey, that's too long? You've been dragging your heels, or do we sort of step back and go, running an entire country? When you take a look at that from that perspective, 10 weeks is actually ahead of schedule or what have you. So I don't know. What do you think?
I think Biden has had a very mixed start to his presidency. It's like,
Yeah.
so we'll go by just issue by issue, right? So we'll start with like COVID, which is a big thing that everybody's kind of like has affected everyone, right? Whether it's from the economy, you think about the economy, to people's health, of course. And he all you had to do there was just to be better than Trump. Like, he didn't really need
Right.
to do anything special. He just kind of had to be in front of a camera, assure people that things are going to be okay. But I think what he's done that actually I think is important, and I think even better than most people, even here in Canada, most people than people have spoken about, the vaccine, for example, where he said, we're aiming by May to have everyone have a vaccine. Every single adult person, basically every single person in the United States, an adult, will have a vaccine by May. So you're giving
Mhm.
people a timeline. One of the biggest challenges, I think, that I think people just have fatigue, because there's just, it seems like there's no end in sight, right? So by
Yeah.
giving people almost like a timeline, it's like we're aiming for May, you're giving people a little bit of assurance. And that's kind of really what people are looking for in a leader. They just want assurance, right? And some kind of calmness after the madness that is Trump, suggesting
Mhm.
people put like bleach in the. I mean,
Yeah.
nobody wants nobody wants to hear that anymore. But I think in that sense, he's done a great job. when it comes to the issue of the stimulus checks, now there again, very mixed bag. It's great that it's going to be passed, whether it comes late or not. I think it's a little bit late. I think it should have been done a little bit earlier, but these things happen. He's done a great job in being able to get $1,400 checks to people, but I think that's going to come back to bite them because they had promised, specifically ran and promised people that it was $2,000 checks.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
1,400, $2,000 checks. Now, at the end of the day, when people are given money, they're going to get money. They'll be
Of
happy.
course.
It'll say, Biden on it. And they'll, as we noticed with Trump, when he put out those checks, which I think has one of the reasons why he did so well. Despite him losing, he did better than what people expected in the elections. I think it was you could tie it back to those checks, right? And because he put his name on it, everybody was like, "Oh, Trump gave me money." So I think it'll probably have the same effect for Biden in the first sort of like few months. But then people forget quickly because politics. There's so many things that happen very quickly, and during the midterms, I think that's going to come back to bite a lot of those Democrats who are in like swing districts.
Mm.
Because they can run an ad saying they promised you $2,000 checks, they gave you 1,400. So
Mm.
who's lying? Anyway, so that's one. And I think the other one is, and I think this is where he lost a lot of the progressives in the US, was he went to bat for Neera Tanden. Like his
Yeah.
administration, they were like, "Oh, we are going to fight hard for Neera." They like said it out loud. That's
Oh
one.
yeah.
And I don't think progressives are forgotten. Do you remember how they called Bernie? He's like, he's disgusting, and like, how could any woman ever work for him? Like, like the way they villainized that man.
Over
Uh,
which man? Which man? Sorry.
Bernie Sanders, because Neera
Oh yeah,
Tanden
yeah,
was right. Neera was so against the left and so against Bernie Sanders, right? And this
yeah.
wasn't
Mm.
long ago. We all remember how that fight went down, right? So
Right. And
these
I forget how Bernie's harshest critics are always
they're
Democrats and never. I
always
don't think Ted Cruz has ever said a bad word about Bernie
never,
Sanders.
never, right? But it's
It's
not
crazy.
just in just words, but it's also in their policies. What are the things that she pursued? But Joe Biden went to bat, so his administration basically said out loud, like, we are going to fight for her to get into power. And when Joe Manchin, I think, was actually, which was very ironic that it was a centrist swing that actually took her down. They basically went to Joe Manchin and they were like, "How dare you oppose a woman of color? And she
Yeah.
is great, right?" They played the whole identity card in that sense. So my point is, he went to bat for Neera Tanden, who's an awful person. I don't know her as a person, but just her policies and the way she is as a person. I think she's just an awful person. By the things she's said about people, she's not. She's an awful person. Um,
Yeah. And
so
her nomination has been withdrawn. Did you see that?
yeah, it was withdrawn. But I think I'm trying to contextualize and just saying that
Right.
I think Biden's administration has been so lackluster because of that, by the things that they followed, right? So the checks, they're mixed bags. Vaccine, I think he's done a great job in that sense, but I think anyone really could have done a great job just by not being Trump. The push for the nominees, the people who he's putting into positions of power, so his administration in general, it's kind of very typical of what we expected, right?
Very
When he
typical.
said when he
Very
said things are gonna go back to normal, it's exactly what he's meant.
very typical.
And then the last point that I'll make to this, so and I brought up Neera Tanden primarily to just juxtapose the way they've gone about trying to get her into a position in government versus the way they've gone to bat for the $15 minimum wage,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
They 50 he gave up 2 weeks ago. It was like, well, if the parliamentarian, who is not elected, by the way, not an elected official, is just an opinion. He's like, well, if the parliamentarian says that it can be
What are
there,
you gonna
well, you
do? I
can't
mean,
just
hey,
do anything. It's just
I'm just the president. What am I gonna do? What am I supposed to? Hey, I'm a little, I don't want to get in trouble.
oh God, I'm just the president, and it's not as if on his platform he promised on his platform
Right,
to bring up the $15 minimum wage. So
right.
he goes against that. In
Mm-hmm.
Republican states, Florida, the $15 minimum wage like ballot passed in Florida, where Democrats and Biden lost. and it
Yeah.
did much better on the margins in terms of its popularity than even the Republicans were voted into office, basically showing that this thing is a very popular legislation. But
Yes.
find me any other Democrat other than the progressives who are fighting to get that into a vote.
Right.
None, right?
So okay, so and I guess and I want to change gears a bit and get sort of into the weeds here about
Yeah.
minimum wage. I was watching before we talked, and I think this is going to be an ongoing thing that'll come up again.
Right.
But should there be? So it's like okay, $15 an hour minimum wage. We
Right.
all agree. Fine. Does that mean we start at $13 an hour and then go 14, 15? If we jump to 15, will it cause inflation or something like that? And then do you have an exemption for small family restaurants? Do you have an exemption for people that are under 50 employees or what have you? Because I just if you just go on YouTube or Google or whatever and you just type in like minimum wage debate or minimum wage restaurant or minimum
Mm,
wage opinion or whatever, often that you'll see that it's the restaurant workers saying, hey, these tips are actually good for me. I'm actually, if you're working at a high end or even any
mm,
restaurant, the
mm,
tips can be well over $15 an hour. And you're like, hey,
right.
man, don't fuck this good thing up for me. I'm actually making good money off tips. Da, 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 da.
Right.
And, you see, like I've seen videos, Canada and the United States saying, I'm a restaurant owner. I own a dry cleaner. I own a cleaning company. I got 12 employees, and if you increase my expenses by 20%, what am I going to do? Am I cutting back hours? Am I increasing prices, etc.? And so it makes me so for don't get me wrong, for Walmart, it should be $20 an hour. You know what I mean? Like corporations, if you're on the S&P 500,
Right.
if you're on the New York Stock Exchange, $15 an hour we should be way past that.
Hmm.
But do we have an exception capped at 10 employees, 50 employees, what have you? And do we have a special exemption for restaurant workers? Or do we sort of even have the broader conversation where we say, hey, to that restaurant worker, hey, like you think you're benefiting off of tips, but no, it's just you've been so economically strangled that you'll take anything that you can get. And tips are actually a mechanism of holding you down
Hmm.
because you're not getting your market mandated wage. You're not getting a share of profits. If in that kind of thing where you're saying you're almost calling for workers to rise up and stand up for your rights and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
So I'm wondering just what you think about it. Neither of us are restaurant owners or dry cleaner owners.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to some, if I can get some
Well, I
background,
think,
but I'm
yeah,
just wondering what you think about it.
yeah. I think you bring up a great point. However,
Yeah.
I will say this. Seattle has a $15 minimum wage.
Yeah.
Restaurants
San
are still open, but
Francisco,
I mean,
New York.
uh, I think there are a lot of places that already have a $15 minimum wage that, from by my standards, I think restaurants are still open. I think people are still doing
Right.
okay. Evidence to
Right.
me shows logically, of course, it makes if you're a business owner, you think, oh my God, I'm going to have expenses that are going to, of course, there will be some kind of time period where it's going to be a difficult moment for it to happen. But what's the alternative? Is the alternative to keep people like starvation wages? Are we
Right.
okay with just continuing for people to work 3, 4, 5 jobs rather
Mm.
than actually getting a salary that actually people deserve? And whether it's, yes, the restaurant industry that says, oh well, you shouldn't put a $15 minimum wage. Okay, if it's not the restaurant, so should we keep the guy that work at McDonald's at a lower wage just because the restaurant owner doesn't want to have a $15 minimum wage? Like, I think it's the same conversation that corporations use to try and wage workers against each other, when it's not really, that's not the fight. The fight is trying to get a living wage for everyone at just a basic level. Like, it's not even a $15 minimum wage is not even enough. It's just, but that's just the
No,
start.
100%. It is the
right.
floor. It's the
It is
floor.
it's just
Absolutely.
like the minimum that everybody could do.
Yeah, yeah,
But I think it could, to help restaurant owners sort of like transition into the $15 minimum wage the way it was being proposed, at least from my understanding from Bernie's side, or a lot of the progressive sort of like legislation, was it was not it wasn't as if they were going to wake up and they're going to say, okay, today, January, $15 minimum wage. It was going to
right.
be phased in, I think, by, I think it was 11, um, I think it was 11,
12,
12,
13.
14, and then up to 15. I think up by 2025, that's when it was going to be phased into all the way through
Okay.
15. So it wasn't something that will just happen within a like 1 year or just a few months.
I see.
It's a phased in period of time. So it gives restaurant owners a time to phase in, to see how everything is working and how they can transition to that. Um, we have a minimum wage here in Canada, but and again, the evidence that somehow putting a minimum wage or increasing a minimum wage is going to cause some economic downfall has not really borne out to be truthful. Like I
Yeah.
I haven't seen it in my submission. I haven't seen it.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that's a conversation that people need to have.
Yeah.
Um, of course, and then of course this is where perhaps the conversation can be made, is that perhaps every state has to have a way of their own minimum wage, like
Mm.
but it can't be up to a certain level, right? So it can't go down to a certain level just depending
Right.
on their economic, because for example, I think West Virginia might, just because of the economy and how low it is, perhaps they may not afford to have a $15 minimum wage. And perhaps for
Yes.
them, $12 minimum wage is probably enough. Who knows? You know, I think that conversation can be had, but I think the bare minimum is just 15. I think that's that's really what you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. No, I think first of all, I think you're right. I think the no one is suggesting that tomorrow morning we wake up, clap our hands, and then it's
Yeah,
$15. And like that's bad economics. We shouldn't
yeah,
do that. And so, but the fact that the fact that the federal minimum is $7 an hour. I don't care if you're in West Virginia. I don't care if you're in Haiti. That is a slap in the
that's
fucking face. Like
crazy.
it is so. So yes, I think that to be perfectly honest, for me, the
Mm,
question is okay. It's March 7th or whatever day it is today. We say in 90 days from now, the
mm,
minimum wage is the federal is gonna jump from 7 to 11. Like
right,
that's gonna be an overnight jump starting in 90 days, and then every 12 months after that, we add a dollar until we get to 15. But
mm,
you're right, for the West Virginia's economy is different from California's, is different from New
right,
Jersey's. But I was listening to a restaurant owner in Toronto.
yes,
They were on CBC talking about, what works for San Francisco, what works for New York doesn't work everywhere. You can't apply it across the board. Okay, fine.
mm-hmm,
But and then the guy went on to talk about how we have this tax, we have this, we have whatever, and he was describing a regulatory burden that
mm-hmm,
even me and you would find too much.
mm-hmm,
And I don't know if you just have friends in the restaurant industry or what have you, but there is nothing I would like. There's nothing riskier than owning a restaurant. Your
yes,
margins are this fucking thin, and your furnace or whatever could break at any time. And someone could slip in their driveway and break their neck or whatever. And I think that when it comes to like, you hear Republicans, you hear just business owners talk about how like the government needs to get off our back, too many regulations, and then there tends to be the progressive response is to talk about worker rights or what have you. But
mm-hmm,
I don't think it's either or. I think it's both. I
yes,
think we need to have a very robust worker safety mechanism and paid family leave and maternity leave, all of these things, the progressive wish list. I think that and reducing the paperwork and the tax burden and the headache for a small business owner is doable. You know what I
yeah,
mean? I suspect that, and for no other, and I'm going to probably come back to this a million times, but if we can live in a world where owning a private jet gets you a tax break, why don't we close that tax loophole and just give it to the people who have less than 50 employees? You know
yeah,
what I mean? Like, I would be right. The guy was talking about his hydro bill. He was
mm,
saying how, as a restaurant owner, this hydro bill is strangling.
mm,
Well, all right. I mean, maybe we buy two or three less airplanes for the Navy or for the Air Force, and
mm-hmm,
just give him the money to pay his hydro bill. Like,
mm-hmm,
if already, if we have this kind of money that we can have these crazy tax loopholes and whatnot, I really think there is room to have that progressive wish list, but also be pro small business at the same time.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest challenges, I think, and I agree with you in that, and with that sentiment, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the biggest challenges, they never even wanted to have a minimum wage conversation until this year.
Mm-hmm.
Like, think about that. Like, the Republican Party never wanted to have a minimum wage conversation until this year, when they were forced into it because of how popular it is and the fact that it passed in Florida and other states.
Yes.
But I think this is a conversation that should have been had a long, long time ago. And then, so yes, you should invite small business owners, but they should come in with the understanding, knowing that, yeah, we want 15 minimum wage and we need to achieve that. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we achieve that and make sure that you are also
Yes.
proposing
Yes.
legislation that's going to keep you afloat, right?
Right.
But
Yeah. No.
that requires to have, I think, a conversation that is extremely difficult to have for a lot of,
Mhm.
because of the way the economic and the political systems are structured.
Yes. So to perfectly jump on what you just said about,
Right.
it's a difficult conversation to have.
Right.
So the first thing that came to my mind is Elizabeth Warren, because she's
Yes.
the queen of having difficult, complex conversations and
Right.
sort of breaking it down. So did you see? I think it was this week or last
Mm-hmm.
week.
Mm-hmm.
Elizabeth Warren, Premier Jayapal, and another congressman, they introduced their version of the wealth tax. So
Okay.
the one, but essentially it's at anyone that makes over with an estate over $50 million pays an additional 2% tax, and then once you get to like $1 billion or something crazy, there's an additional tax on that. And so, and it's kind of silly because it's like it's such a low tax, that's such a high number.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, and so the numbers, the quick math on that is that
Mm-hmm.
it'll affect about 300,000 people, 300,000 Americans who have that kind of money, and it would bring in like well over $100 billion over 10 years,
Okay.
and that money is, of course, that's for Medicare for all, for fixing public schools, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
So I don't know, like Marjorie Taylor Greene is going to get more coverage in the news. You know what I mean? So it really frustrates me because
Yes.
I wonder if we're just like, if this is all a big game, where it's like Elizabeth Warren has clearly articulated where the money is going to come from for the progressive agenda. There's no debate. There's no theoretical about taxes going up or down. We're taking the 300,000 richest Americans and we're asking them to chip in 2% of all of the money that they've made from the pandemic and what have you.
Yes.
So, and saying, let's take that money and let's use it to fund these programs. And so, and then you have Lindsey Graham going, well, how are we going to pay for it? You know what I mean? And it frustrates me because how are you going to pay for it is still being um, discussed as an actual thing. And it frustrates me, like on the right, that they're bringing it up. But I guess it frustrates me that on the left, we aren't like bringing that up every time. You know what I mean? Like we should almost begin the conversation with how are we going to pay for
I think it's just it starts off with who asks the questions, right? I was watching the CNN coverage about the $15 minimum wage, and
it? Right.
they were asking Premier Jayapal, well, Joe Biden, seemed to be okay, as a candidate, seemed to be okay with what you asked, basically asking that it's the progressives that are asking for the $15 minimum wage, but it's not the progressives. It's like, this is a very popular legislation, so the
Right.
question
Right.
should
Right.
have
Right.
been
Right.
that the American people want,
Right.
you know.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to pass this legislation that the American people want? Instead, they ask the question, how is it they're going to pass this legislation that you want, right? So
Yes.
it's
Yes.
just like in the way the conversations are framed and who
Very much
frames
so.
these conversations. At the end of the day, whether what was very clear, especially in the primary, as much as we hate the media has so much power still,
Right.
huge amounts of
Yeah.
power. And they frame the conversation, they frame the debate around these huge topics that I think are important. Again,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's the $15 minimum wage, whether it's how do we pay for all these programs, who they frame these conversations from a very right wing perspective, and so you're forced to answer from the right wing's perspective. And
Yes.
so yes, I am, I think, very 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 aware, and I think I'm with you, where I think you should always start the conversation with, before you even ask how we're going to pay for it, this is
Right.
how we're going
Exactly. Exactly.
to
Exactly.
but I think,
Exactly.
again, that's we don't have a lot of very I think one of the biggest challenges that we have on the left in general in many places, we just don't have very good communicators. There are very few. Even Bernie Sanders, as much as I love the man, he's not an effective communicator. um
Mm.
where I think, where Elizabeth Warren was, I think Warren was a very great communicator, but I think her instincts are very much more into, like, I work on the inside type of thing, which is why she was not popular with the left. It's like, so if you could just marry those two things,
Mm.
then you
Mm.
you get a perfect candidate, which I think I see you see in AOC type of thing.
Mhm.
But I think you're right. It should be a conversations that should be had. I think it's you should frame the conversation from your perspective, but I think it's just challenging when it's constantly this same question is drummed up time, because yeah, you might have that conversation, right? They might interview you for, like, I don't know, 2-3 minutes about your program, and yes, you frame that question from, oh, this is how we're going to pay for it. But for the next 30, 40, 50 minutes, they're going to talk about, oh, the $15 minimum wage is going to cost jobs according to this think tank
Yeah.
and this thing,
Mm.
right? So at the end of the day, within the 24-hour period, you only had 5 minutes to make your point. For all the other hours that they have throughout the day, they're drumming this, like, right wing point. And so people go away with being like, yeah, I guess the $15 minimum wage can be feasible,
Mhm. Mhm.
right?
So is like you talk about, Bernie Sanders, you love him, but he may not be the best communicator, or you know, like Bernie Sanders is flawed, Elizabeth Warren is flawed, AOC is flawed, Nina Turner is flawed, and so, but you have in each of them, like I would say, like Nina Turner on her worst
Yes.
day is a fucking 10 times better
Oh,
communicator than Marco Rubio,
way,
right?
way, way
Fucking,
better.
you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
So it's almost like, and it's like the old adage about, black people have to be twice as good to get half as much or what have you, but it's
yes.
like, the in order for the progressive agenda to work, you have to be spotless. You
Mm,
have to have, you know what I mean? Like
yes.
it's like even Bernie Sanders, we're like we have to get out our magnifying glass to find a criticism, and we're like,
Yes.
yeah, he doesn't speak Japanese or some fucking shit or whatever, just to criticize him or whatever. But it's like on his worst day, he is
Mm,
better than the entire Republican caucus. So
yes.
it just kind of frustrates me that 96% good isn't good enough when it comes to being on the progressive side. So
Yeah.
I don't know, like so like for me, like you and I, we're not neither of us are American, but why isn't the Democratic Party having daily Medicare for all briefings in the South, in Texas, in Louisiana? I just don't understand how the crisis in Texas with the power going out, people
Hmm.
freezing to death, all these are golden opportunities to just and not have a town hall, but literally just go with like 6 people and just
Hmm.
be like, this is the progressive agenda, this is how we're going to pay for it, and this is how we're going to help you. Like it seems as if the argument is made amongst a roundtable at MSNBC, but like that's not where the conversation needs to be had. And so it makes me one. I mean, I don't know the full extent of what the DCCC is doing or what the Democratic Party is doing, but I don't think Joe Biden is going to kitchen tables in Louisiana and explaining why Medicare for all is good for them. Although that is exactly what he should be doing.
Yeah. I think we know the answer why that conversation is not had. We know.
We
At
know
the
the
end of the
answer.
We know the answer, right? Because at the end of the day, I remember during the primary, Joe Biden's Medicare plan was basically his health plan was basically taken off of a pharmaceutical company's website and
Yeah.
literally planted onto Joe
Yes.
Biden's website.
Yes.
So at the end of the day, it's like these conversations are will never be had because there's a lot of money, a lot of interest
Mhm.
so invested into politics, right? And
Yeah.
that's not just it's not just in the US. That's not just a symptom in the US. I think it's just politics everywhere. And I think the day we started marrying money and politics really sort of muddied the waters for a lot of things, and it became
Absolutely.
very difficult to legislate, you know, when
Mhm.
the fact that AOC highlighted, and I think she even sent out a tweet once after the elections highlighting the flaws of the DCCC and the way they from their fundraising, from their communication, and she even gave like tips because she managed to do it. The
Yeah.
progressives have managed to do it without fundraising from big donors, but the interest that be doesn't want that to be. They don't want
Right.
that because again, where you're making money, you're becoming a millionaire. Are you going to stop taking millions and be like, oh, I have to go and like start talking to Joe Schmo
Mhm.
from the Bronx to give me like $2? You know,
Right.
I think the way I think the way you overcome this whole system, I think the way you really overcome this whole thing, one is through like legislation for reform of just the of the voting system in the state.
Mhm.
Andrew Yang had yes, the idea of the Mercos dollars. I think that is fantastic. The idea that
Mhm.
everyone has to get money that they have to donate to a political party,
Right.
and it's illegal if you don't do it. I think is the most brilliant idea to change. I think it changes the game because there you're putting the money into the hands of people. They'll donate to whoever they want to donate to, right?
Right. Right. Right.
And then taking away the funding of political parties from them going to ask donations from business interests, because then you're taking away that lobbying power that they have, right?
Mhm.
And they can't bundle money, so you can't bundle all this money from people. It has to be an individual donation, the way it's done by progressives have done it, right? So it's an individual donation. So you take away the conversations from being had by just a very small handful of people, and now you give the power back into the people's hands. They
Yeah.
choose who they want, and that person has to win their donation, so they have to talk to those people about what
Yes.
they're going to do for them,
Yes.
right? And I think that's the way you change that conversation. But without that, you can't, because at the end of the day, if I'm spending 80% of my time on the phone call, like
Right.
I only have basically an hour to do my work, and then the rest is basically I gotta go home. When am I going to
Yes.
go off and talk to anybody about farmer care or any other
Yeah.
legislation that I want to pass? You know?
Mhm. 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 Interesting. Yeah, no, you're right. At the end of the day, the money isn't. There's no plan to defeat money. Like that's never going to change. But you
Mm-hmm.
can sort of you can align the objectives to where it's and are you familiar with the John Lewis Voting Rights Act?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So again, that another one very frustrating. If you had Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema on board, you'd be able to get rid of the filibuster so that the John Lewis Voting Rights Act can become law.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for whether it's this or whether it's I don't know if you remember from way back the McCain-Feingold Act talking about campaign finance reform,
Mm.
we I it's I don't think we lack solutions. We don't lack proposals. There's a lot of smart people doing a lot of smart things, and not all and a lot of people are sick of the bullshit. So it's it's not about what's the plan. It's like you have this wall, and it's so hard to get past. And it's like you just know that Joe Manchin's financial backers are telling him not to support this and whatnot. And so it's like,
And it doesn't sell on the news, right? This is the other part that we also have to understand, and where I was saying like the media has a lot of power is that they do have a lot of power by what they choose to cover. In fact, the editor of the Washington Post very recently came out and he basically said this. He said, if it wasn't for Donald Trump and for us covering Donald Trump, we wouldn't reach our subscription goals. Like
really?
imagine, yeah. This was said very recently. I think it was a couple weeks ago.
Mm.
He's just basically said we're not doing news, we're doing entertainment.
Yeah.
Like we are covering, yes, the news, quote unquote, but
Yeah.
they're choosing which news to cover,
Right.
right?
Yeah,
You're
I mean,
choosing which news to cover.
let me ask you a question.
Yes.
How much do you follow or listen to Rachel Maddow?
Oh, I stopped listening to her quite a while actually.
Really?
I stopped listening to Rachel Maddow a very long time ago. I think
Really?
I read Hate Inc. I don't know if you've ever read Hate Inc. It's a book. I think everyone should read it. It's like it's like a follow up to Noam Chomsky's
Manufacturing consent?
Manufacturing Consent. Yes, so
Okay,
it's
okay.
sort of like it's not by Noam Chomsky. It's by another writer. It's He's a progressive writer as well, but
But it picks up the
journalist.
mantle
But it picks
and
up that idea and brings it back to the 21st century, right?
mm.
Hate Inc. really, once you read it, you kind of understand why Rachel Maddow exists. She's
Oh,
not
tell me, I'm
covering.
so curious.
She's.
I'm so curious.
It's what we were talking about, like news, the connection between news and corporations, and then what they choose to do, what they choose to cover, what they choose to not cover. Like
Right.
at the end of the day, MSNBC is a business. It's a business. It's in the business of making money. And what
Yes.
is going to make money? It's the most salacious news that they can get. That's what
Mm.
they'll give you.
Of
So when
course.
Richard Maddow went on, I mean, and I will admit I was on the binge too for a while when the Russiagate thing came out. I was like, holy shit,
Yes.
Donald Trump, man, he's an asset from 1987.
Yeah.
Damn, in the Russian asset. Like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm ready to listen.
Yeah.
And they brought and Rachel Maddow brought the guy who brought up that whole
Oh yeah.
conspiracy.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
they still bring him on to this day, and she
Oh
has
yeah.
never apologized for that. But what that did, it eroded the trust that people have in media, because then people are like, why are you covering such salacious news, for what reason? And not just for like 2 minutes, I'm talking about a whole show,
Oh yeah.
like
Oh
a
yeah.
full on
Oh
hour.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
I
uh
remember, bro, like when like in 20 like it's honestly I think she must love Donald Trump because like she would do these like 18-minute like essays like
mhm.
she would go hard, bro. Like
Yo, I
it
was
would
like,
go,
damn, like
go.
she ain't playing.
Like it would be like sometimes like she talk about like Deutsche Bank and how like nobody like she would just and don't get me wrong, Donald Trump is an asshole. Donald Trump
Yeah.
is not he's like and that's kind of the frustrating thing. Like she wasn't saying Donald Trump is an alien. She wasn't saying he breathes fire or he
Yeah.
kidnaps children or whatever the fuck. So unfortunately, there is a connection to legitimate, shady business
Yes.
deals.
Yes,
Being,
absolutely.
Deutsche Bank here owes them
Yes.
$100 million, whatever. So I want to be clear, like she's not making up things. She's not
No.
saying,
No, 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 no. I think
like
she just the angle that they choose to go with it, right? So rather than
yeah,
going with follow where the money, right? So the problem, which is he's being audited for right now in New York, and he's being
yeah,
investigated for, right? Which is his money connection to a lot of like really shady money like banks.
yeah,
This is what he's being investigated for.
yes,
Rather than following the angle, which is I think would have actually taken him down as president. I think if you followed where the money was, that's really what would have. But they went with the angle of, well, he is Putin's,
yeah,
Putin's got him in his pocket, and well, he's been, why we say he's Putin's like puppets, because well, in 1987 he went to
yeah,
Russia, and do you know he met with this guy, right? And then automatically, even now, I was like, damn, well, I'm ready, because everybody's ready for. I'm ready for an
yeah,
espionage story. I'm like, wait, yo, are we living double agent? Like what?
yeah, yeah. No, no. Honestly, like I don't think I've ever seen passion. She would bring more passion than like Michael Jordan during a playoff game. She went hard, like, and it's almost like I'm not even hating on her. I almost
Right.
respect how like deep she took
Deep,
it,
and then yes.
and she was not playing no games. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
she was like, "You're right,"
Yeah.
and then he met with Sergey Kislyak, and
Mm-hmm.
then this time, and look at the thing, and but it was and, like because I can't call her crazy. I can't call her a conspiracy theorist because the things she's saying are true. They actually did happen, and Trump
That's
is a
right.
shady guy. But like the overhyped, over
Over
sensationalized,
sensationalized. Yes.
she was selling movies.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Let's be real.
Yes.
Like I don't know if you remember, but there was one episode, but this was like before, in 2016 before the election, and she tweeted out, she's like, "We have Trump's tax returns. Like we'll be
Mm-hmm.
talking about it tonight."
Right.
And it
Right.
was, she's like, "We have Trump's tax
Yes.
returns." She
Yes.
tweeted
Yes.
out
Yes.
dot dot dot, and then you tune in that night, and she has like one page
One page.
for
Yes, I remember that.
1996.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
was like, bro, like that's
Yeah.
whack, dog. Like
Imagine, right?
you're
Girl, I was like, "Yo, it's going down." I was like, I thought I was living in the Born Identity. I was like, "Oh, we're in the
yes,
Born series
big
right now." I was like, "Where's Matt Damon? Is he coming out somewhere?"
yo, yeah. Yo, like it was so hard. And like you watch, and then Morning Joe, they go hard,
Mhm.
like, but they're just lazy about it, where they just
Just
sort of pick on
lazy.
Trump or
Yeah,
whatever the fuck.
yeah.
Do you think? Because I don't know if you've been following what's going on with Facebook and Australia.
Yeah.
Do you think like the solution is that me and you pay for CBC News and we pay for CBC News and we pay for the New York Times, or do you think it should be given like it should be given funded by the government, where it's like the BBC and the CBC, where like they're subsidized by the state and that's the provider of news? Like, should the government just subsidize? Let's say they're going to take 20. When they subsidize the top 20 news organizations, we'll give them $10 million a year and just do objective reporting, no advertising, no nothing like that. Since that's highly unlikely, do you think every single news source, ABC, CBC, whatever, you want to get the new access, you pay
Yeah.
$10, you pay $20. You know what I mean? Like, is it or like what's the solution? You know what I mean? Because
Mm.
and like almost we can parallel this conversation to like big tech, because we're like,
Right.
oh, they're spying on us, they're using our data to sell us ads. It's like, okay, are you suggesting that we pay for Gmail? We pay for Instagram? Do like what is the path forward? So I don't know if you have any thoughts. I'd love to hear them.
Mm. I'm not going to pretend that I know the answer to
Yeah,
all
because
of
I don't
that.
fucking know. I'll be real. I don't
I
know.
don't know, but I am sure if you give me time, I'd probably find.
Yeah.
We live in a society. I think that we have so much expertise and so much knowledge on these topics, but
Yes.
they're never given the light of day again, because deliberately, whether the people that are supposed to give us that time or are supposed to air these types of discussions
Mhm.
never given the time. I think there are solutions that I'm sure are available, that have been done, that are successful.
Mhm.
Whether it's when we talk about on the issue of healthcare, there is Medicare for all. Any
Right.
country that has single payer healthcare system works much better, much cheaper than the system they have, private systems. Like, so on every issue, there are countries that have done it better and have been successful at doing it.
Right.
So why not look at their examples and figure out ways that you could incorporate that into your own system? I think just this as a first step, this is not the only solution, but just as a first step, you have to break down monopolies. Because I
Yeah.
think monopolies, if we're going to talk about in capitalism, I think monopolies are the antithesis of capitalism, of the free market.
Yes. Yes, because
They're
it's
terrible for it.
right. Yes. There's no
And
competition, no
there's no
innovation.
competition, no innovation, because all you're doing now is you're just consolidating all the money and power and the talent all into one place. And I think
Right.
that's I don't think that works. I think that's we are reaching a point where it's like, well, this if it doesn't work for governments, when governments monopolize every industry, then why is it working for the private
Good
industry to do
question.
the
Right.
same?
That's a great question.
Right.
It's a very, very
So
good question.
I think that's a question that should be asked.
Right. So okay. So I think, just in hearing you talk, I
Mm,
think I have one good idea.
mm.
It's not this by no means a new idea, but I think it works. And it's local newspapers
Yes.
and local news channels. I
Yes.
think if every single
Yes.
person, if me and you just gave the Toronto Star ten
Mm,
dollars, and the people in
mhm,
Milwaukee give the Milwaukee newspaper $10,
mhm,
and
mhm.
if every citizen of their own individual
An
city,
individual state, yeah.
and we're not talking anything great, we're talking $5 and $10 a month.
Mhm, mhm.
If you funded your local newspaper, I
Yes.
guarantee you the ripple effects about
Yes.
different our democracy, what
Mm,
the kind of content we see,
right.
the kind of content we consume. I
Yes.
guarantee all of that would go in the right direction if the citizens of Cincinnati funded the Cincinnati Enquirer. The
Yes.
citizens
Yes.
of
Yes.
Halifax funded the Halifax Enquirer, and that was it.
Yes.
I don't know if that's the only thing we need to do, but I think if we're asking about solutions, I think that's one thing
I agree.
we should do.
Yeah.
And to be very, I'll be honest, I don't really know about the Toronto Star. Like, are they good? Are they bad? Are they left? Are they right? Like, I really couldn't say too much about it.
Right.
But I think, I like what I need to, like, putting my money where my mouth is. Like, I guess I need to become a subscriber of the Toronto Star. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
I wouldn't give
Right.
2 cents to the Toronto Sun. You know what I mean? But I wouldn't give these people 2 fucking cents. But the Toronto Sun. But anything Sun News, like I literally would laugh in your face if you said you got a job at Sun News. Like it's such
I
a
had a
joke.
friend who got a job at Sun News,
Oh my
and
god.
she was just like, working here. She's like, I'm just glad I get paid, but my
Yeah,
God, working here is a comedy.
it's probably like working at Hooters or working for WWE or something like that. Like I really imagine just like just the most crazy frat boy type that.
Yeah.
Oh my god. But anyways, we'll leave it at
Yeah.
that. We'll leave it at
Yeah.